from campus where experienced instructors teach how to trade stocks, options, futures, and Forex while limiting risk. Many students trade with a couple of thousand. Online Trading Academy in South Florida, the most trusted name in financial education since 1997. Day and weekend classes available. See how it works. Reserve a seat for the most amazing half-day class on trading. No cost. Call 954-668-2510 or text the letters OTA to the numbers 41411 or call 954-668-2510.
Talk 1470 WWNN Pompano Beach, Boca Raton, Miami, Fort Lauderdale.
Gallbladder problems, gingivitis, a bad back, indigestion, fatigue, low libido, not sleeping well, need to lose weight. Just some of the topics you'll hear about. Hi, I'm Dr. Bob Martin. Join me Sunday mornings at 10 on Talk 1470 WNN.
This is our market analysis and forecast for the month of September. Peter Bruno reporting. There has been a lot of technical damage done in the stock market recently, with the major averages falling more than 12% from recent highs. The Dow Jones Industrial Average, currently in the 16,000 area, would need to close above 17,570. That is to close above 17,570 in order for the stock market to move back up. Listen to my Buy, Sell, or Hold radio program, heard daily at 4:30, and audio streaming live at peterbrunomedia.com for additional details.
The opinions expressed on the preceding sponsored program were strictly those of its hosts, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of this station, its staff, management, or sponsors.
The content of the following program, including all statements from the host and guests, is to provide general information and commentary about the law. Under no circumstances does any statement made by a host or guest to a caller or listener constitute legal advice or the formation of an attorney-client relationship, and the material from this program should not be viewed as a substitute for personal consultation with an attorney. Welcome to Talk Legal with Jeff Van Treese, who brings you all the latest news in the legal world. Jeff will be discussing a variety of legal topics with experts in the field. If you would like to ask a question or share a story on the air, please call toll-free 888-565-1470. Once again, that's 888-565-1470. Now, let's talk legal with Jeff Van Treese.
Good evening and welcome to another edition of Talk Legal. I'm your host, Jeff Van Treese. I'm an attorney with the law firm Oltman, Flynn & Kubler, where we practice intellectual property law, including patents, trademarks, and copyrights. You can check us out online and view all episodes of this show on our website at oltmanpatent.com. That's OLTMANPATENT.com. My guest this evening is Jeff Brown. Jeff's been on before. He practices in a number of different areas of litigation, both civil and criminal. This evening we're going to be talking about the recent story about Kim Davis. She was the clerk in Kentucky that recently went to jail over her refusal to issue marriage licenses after the recent Supreme Court ruling that prohibition of same-sex marriage was unconstitutional. Jeff actually had a front row seat to the oral arguments in that Supreme Court decision back in, when were the oral arguments? It was back in
April 28th.
April 28th. So he's going to share his thoughts on that and what the recent developments out in Kentucky. But just, we got to talk about the recent news over the weekend. She was released from jail at the end of last week after serving 5 days for her refusal to issue marriage licenses. Actually, I think we got to move that. You can just talk into the microphone. So she was jailed for 5 days, and she was released, but it was on a condition that she not impede same-sex couples that were applying for marriage licenses from receiving them, which is what she was doing before. There was some serious controversy as to what was going to happen because she's saying this is her religious freedom. She appeared to indicate that she was not going to issue licenses because her faith prohibited her from doing that. She seems to have worked out some sort of compromise. She's said she is no hero, indicating she does not wish to return to jail, and that she will allow her deputy clerks that are working under her to issue licenses. She won't sign off on it. She won't say that they're doing it under her authority, but she won't stop them from doing it. So she seems to be trying to keep her job and avoiding jail time by working out this sort of strange compromise. Interesting situation. What are your thoughts on the story?
I think it's a little more than strange. If she's an elected official, she has a job to do, and I think she either has to do her job or get rid of her job. The compromise is rather absurd to allow the office to issue them, but act like, it's not under my authority or under my watch. It is. If she's the clerk, she's the one to do it, and it is a strange compromise.
You brought up the fact that it's her job. She this is not something that she was compelled to do. This isn't like jury duty or something like that. Looks like we might be having some technical problems here. Hopefully that mic's working here for Jeff now. Very good. So as we were saying, she was elected. So she ran for office, and she took it upon herself to do these administrative duties, these ministerial duties as a clerk. And ultimately what a clerk does is they issue licenses when the parties that are applying for those licenses qualify. And her only duties is to determine whether the parties that are applying for these licenses, in this case, the marriage licenses, meet the criteria. And the criteria doesn't come from her and her personal beliefs, it comes from the law. So that's how she was held in contempt of court. She was held in contempt of court because she was not acting in accordance with a dispositive ruling that came from the Supreme Court, which said that the licenses had to be issued.
So if you're the gatekeeper and somebody comes with the right credentials, you're supposed to open the gate and let them in, and that's what the court ruled. And she decided for reasons which I guess are her own, or her religion, or whatever is somewhat not her job to make those decisions. She doesn't want to do the job, you quit the job.
And that's the other thing, is that she went to jail because she could have resigned if she absolutely felt like her religious beliefs were incompatible with her duties as a clerk. And this brings up another issue with the Supreme Court and other federal courts have pretty much consistently ruled that what would ordinarily be a First Amendment right to practice your religion does not really extend to public officials with respect to carrying out their duties. They're agents of the state. And, we were talking before the show, what if you didn't believe in any marriage whatsoever and you were just going to deny all applicants for a marriage license? Or what if you didn't believe in guns? There's a lot of people that don't think that guns should be legal. And you don't think that that's moral to grant gun licenses, so you're not going to grant gun licenses. This is not within the discretion of the gatekeeper. Their job is to see that the law is carried out.
Same thing applies to judges, applies to her. You become elected, and there are laws you're supposed to follow. You don't have a choice except to give up the job.
They couldn't fire her because she was elected, but if you were in the state Senate, you might be looking at impeachment proceedings for a situation like this, that she's just willfully, that's what impeachment is for, is when an elected official is violating the law, they're violating their oath. Because when you take any elected position that you take when you run for office, you swear an oath to uphold the laws and Constitution of the United States. And if you're willfully violating it, then you're violating that oath. And an oath is something that is a very sacred process. And so if you're willfully violating the very oath that you took, that you got elected for, then under those circumstances you can be impeached and then removed from office. So it would be interesting to see if somebody went out and actually tried to impeach her for this.
Yes, and that's why I'm not a fan of the compromise of suggesting I'll stand aside and let the people under my watch do the work. I think it's her job to grant the license.
Right, and it's like we said earlier, she took the job, and that's what she has to do. Former governor of Arkansas, Mike Huckabee, was, of course, in the news, too. They had a huge rally when she was released from jail on Friday, and he went so far as to make the preposterous statement that if you're going to put her in jail, put him in instead, as though that's possible. that you could simply substitute one person for another with respect to a criminal contempt of court charge. But putting that aside, it's, we're going into the election cycle that is ongoing right now. We have the debate coming up Wednesday. I'm sure we're going to be hearing about this in the Republican debate, certainly with the conservative, religious conservative Christian constituency. This is a big issue. They say God's law trumps man's law and so forth. There was a lot of people with signs and at the rally there when she was released that were saying that this is part of religious liberty. But, this just goes back. You don't really have to be a lawyer to understand. This just goes back to basic high school civics that, we have this thing called the Establishment Clause that says that the state cannot entangle itself with religion. And when the state becomes entangled with religion, that's unconstitutional. That, fortunately, hasn't happened here. This is just a lone wolf, a rogue official acting on her own behalf. But the whole concept of God's law trumps man's law is just that's not a legitimate legal argument. It might be in Saudi Arabia, but not here.
She should probably read the opinion of the court, which suggests that the right to marry is a fundamental right, and that everyone has it, and that the 14th Amendment, frankly, trumps her argument.
Yeah, it wouldn't do much good if she did. She would just say that this is amoral, this isn't something she should be doing. But again, when somebody runs for office, they have to serve, all of the public. They can't just serve those that they want to. So it's going to be interesting. I'm really struck by the whole concept of they're saying that Christianity is under attack by the now legalization of same-sex marriage. There are arguments that Christianity is under attack, and this is something that we've seen for a long time. It's really a problematic argument because this does not infringe on anybody's. They're saying redefining traditional marriage infringes on Christians' religious beliefs. Therefore, it's a violation of their right to practice religion, but it just doesn't. It does not in any way infringe on anybody's right to practice any religion. People are free to practice their religion. Opposite-sex couples are free to apply and receive marriage licenses. Nobody is aggrieved here. It's just that you just have a segment of the population that just finds same-sex marriage amoral. They find it, they just disapprove of it, but that is not a valid reason under our democracy.
They talk about definitions of the institution of marriage of a man and a woman, and all of that was argued. The justices dealt with it. The council argued it back and forth, and the conclusion was, in this day and age, that it's a fundamental right, and that's what it is.
Well, I'd like to get your thoughts, but since you were actually there and heard the oral argument, there's talk of possibly Kim Davis's case, or if some other clerk or rogue official decides to do this being appealed and trying to take it to the Supreme Court. But the Supreme Court's already ruled, so there's really nowhere else for them to go. There's no new arguments to be had here that haven't already been brought to the court's attention. When you were there, is that pretty much your impression? Everything pretty much was laid out for the judges.
It was laid out. There was more than one state there because they consolidated all the appeals. They narrowed it down to two fundamental questions. One was, is it a fundamental right that everyone has the right to marry? And they ruled that it was. They had a second argument, if we don't rule that way, that it's covered under the 14th Amendment and therefore available to everyone. They got into reciprocity, whether a state had to honor a marriage in another state if your state, didn't allow it. They never reached that because it's considered a fundamental right that every person has.
You're bringing up the second part that the court never got to, is the full faith and credit clause, which is that's a constitutional requirement that each state honor the laws of the other 49 states. And you had an issue here with states that expressly disallowed same-sex marriage from recognizing same-sex marriage or same-sex marriage adoption and so forth in other states, recognizing the legality of those other marriages. the court never got there because it simply ruled that marriage is a fundamental right protected by the 14th Amendment, and therefore all 50 states are required to essentially legalize or to allow same-sex marriage licenses to be issued. State cannot prohibit same-sex marriage, and so that's what happened there. There's some comparisons being made by some between Kim Davis and Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King Jr., and other civil rights icons from our history, in the sense that she's standing up for what she believes in. She has these very deeply held convictions, and she's willing to be jailed for them, in the same sense that Martin Luther King was jailed for his civil rights beliefs, and there are certain comparisons that can be made, but at some point the comparisons just fall short. They just stop, because in the case of Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks and others that have stood up to oppressive authority, they were fighting for rights for themselves and others. What Kim Davis is doing, and those that are opposed to same-sex marriage, they're trying to stop people from having rights and from exercising their rights. So they're really, she's really more like George Wallace, or being defiant on the steps of the schoolhouse, saying, segregation today, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. With his famous quote. He's been vilified, rightfully so, throughout history because he was trying to stop the civil rights of African Americans from being advanced. He was not advancing anyone's rights. And that's what we're seeing here. And it's just not really a valid comparison to put her in the same sentence or paragraph, for that matter, of the great civil rights icons.
The only comparison is that they were willing to go to jail, but some went to jail for the right reasons, and she went to jail for the wrong reason.
And she was a public official. Can't forget that too. Just like George Wallace was a public official, abusing their power after the Supreme Court ruled that they can't do that. Very big difference from everything, like you said, the right reason and a reason that is discriminatory or highly suspect. But the timing of this just could not be, more. The political aspect of this case, with the timing being during the election cycle. This is going to be a hot topic for Wednesday. It's going to be interesting to see what the candidates do with this. So this is going to be a political football that they go back and forth talking about religious liberty. But I think they really do this at their own peril, because there's a very large percentage of the population, including moderate Republicans and libertarian Republicans, that are not going to be very receptive to Republican candidates saying that they want to see more public officials disobeying the Constitution, disobeying the Supreme Court's ruling.
Well, timing is always important, and the politics will permeate it, and away we go. We'll see what positions the various candidates take on what is, frankly, a simple issue.
Well, we think we know where Huckabee stands on this. And we can probably guess where Ted Cruz and some of the others, but when we get into candidates that are opposed to same-sex marriage, but we don't really know whether they're in favor of lawlessness, so I don't know where people like Jeb Bush, Donald Trump, of course, has been in the news a lot. I think he was opposed to same-sex marriage. I don't know if he's supporting what Kim Davis is doing, among some of the others. But we really don't know. Be interesting to see what Rand Paul does, Chris Christie, and some of the more vocal members of that debate. There's going to be tomorrow night. There's going to be 2 debates, so we'll see what's said. I have a feeling we're going to probably hear some just monumentally offensive language coming from some of the candidates, because some of them, especially the ones that are falling in the polls, are sort of grasping at straws, and they're going to be trying to grab a hold of at least part of that fringe constituency that would rather see lawlessness in order to further their own bigotry, quite frankly.
The search for votes is always an interesting egg hunt.
Oh, for sure. I can't help but think of what would happen if this were a Muslim, for example. You wouldn't have this much support for religious liberty. For example, if somebody if you had a devout Muslim that, for example, insisted that everyone pray 5 times a day or something like that, that would not go over well at all with the, that there would be no support for that. But because this is a woman doing it for motivations that she relates to Christianity, that's part of the majority, and so she gets support. That is the exact opposite of what our Constitution is supposed to be facilitating, which is that it protects people from the will of the majority. It protects people from just what are the illegitimate, at least legally illegitimate social mores that are trying to be pushed on to people's lives. And it would be hard to see this if this were an atheist or a Muslim, and you had to, if you were an applicant for a license and you had to pass that test of faith as opposed to a Christian test of faith, probably wouldn't get the same amount of support.
Well, that's why you have a Constitution, which some of us believe in, and if you have a Constitution, then the Supreme Court is there to guard the constitutional rights that are given us, and that's what this came down to, was a constitutional question. It's not a popularity contest. It's not who likes same-sex marriages, who doesn't, who's opposed to it. It's whether or not it's protected by the Constitution, and the Supreme Court wrestled with coming out after millions and millions of years with an understanding that it's a fundamental right, irrespective of whether you want to do it.
And in the last few minutes we have left, I also have to say that it's also about the rule of law. And, following the law is just a critical part of an elected official, like we were talking about earlier. You can be impeached for not following it. That's happened to judges, I'm sure, in your many years of practicing. You've heard of judges being impeached for various reasons. And, there were comparisons made by Mike Huckabee during the rally for Kim Davis when she was released from jail, in which he was comparing her to the former Lieutenant Governor of California, where he was granting same-sex marriage licenses. This is before the Supreme Court ruling. He was granting licenses to same-sex couples, even though California law appeared to indicate that he wasn't supposed to be doing that. That same-sex marriage was at that time prohibited. When the courts ruled, when it went up to the California Supreme Court, they ruled that he had to stop issuing marriage licenses. He stopped because there was a court order telling him to. He did not attempt to disobey, did not attempt to thwart a court order. That's an extreme contrast to the Kim Davis case, which is that when we have an order, especially coming from the Supreme Court or a higher authority that commands an official to do something, they have to do it. We're a country of laws, not of men, as the old phrase goes, and if people are allowed to disobey the law based upon religious liberty, then ultimately we could descend into anarchy, and that can't be allowed.
The rule of law is the thing we have to hang our hats on ultimately and follow, especially if you're an elected official.
Right. So
it's your choice.
Yeah, it's her choice, and she took the job voluntarily. We have to remind ourselves of that. She was free to resign. She remains free to resign, and there were some comparisons made also between Kim Davis and there was a Muslim woman recently that was put on suspension. I think it was a 12-month suspension. She was employed by ExpressJet. That's an airline, and her religious beliefs. She was a newly converted to Muslim. She had been employed with the airline before she had converted, and she had learned that her new religion prohibited her from serving alcohol to the passengers. So there were some issues about, they tried to accommodate her, which they're required to do. It's based on the idea that you shouldn't have to choose between your job and your religion. So if a reasonable accommodation can be made, then it should be made. And she was able to essentially do other duties other than serving alcohol. And that worked, and then there was a subsequent complaint that was filed with her employer from one of the other stewards or stewardesses, and then she got put on administrative leave, and now there's a lawsuit. And so they were comparing that to Kim Davis, but I just don't think that even that, and I don't know whether that case has merit or not. It would have to be tried before a jury for us to really know. But that case was different because it was a private employer, and it wasn't an essential function of the stewardess's job to necessarily serve alcohol. Stewardesses do other things as well. And so you try to make reasonable accommodation. But when you're talking about an elected official, they have to not only do they have to follow the laws we were discussed earlier, but granting a marriage license is such an essential function of a clerk that for her to say that she can't do it based on religious beliefs, it just does not. There's just no angle with which that works. It just contradicts directly with her function. It contradicts directly with the law. There's really no more discussion to be had here. There's a lot of political pandering to be had, but no real legal discussion.
Well, she had the keys to her jail cell, but she can't ignore the Constitution and she can't ignore the United States Supreme Court. She can quit, and she doesn't have to go to jail. But if she makes the choice to stay, now she's violating her obligations.
And it's not just her, too. I'm troubled that a former governor is out there saying that this is okay and encouraging other officials to do this. And I guess we're going to find out tomorrow night at the elections whether more high-positioned officials, governors, senators, etc., are also going to be encouraging this conduct. And if they do, that's very troubling because they're ultimately putting political pandering above the Constitution, and perhaps they're fomenting an atmosphere that is going to lead to more constitutional violations, and that can't be good.
You can't let politics rule the rule of law.
Yeah, you can't, and we're going to see if there are other instances. Hopefully, this is it, and we won't be seeing any more constitutional violations coming from court clerks. We have about a minute left. I want to make sure you have an opportunity to give your contact information to our listeners.
It's Jeff Brown. My phone number is 561-395-0000. And the firm is Laval, Brown & Ronan. We're on the website. And my email is jbrown@bocalaw.com.
We have a few seconds left. You just want to tell us your practice areas real quick.
Well, I do a lot of commercial litigation. Our firm is a litigation-oriented firm. We do mediations. And we have a rather broad-based set of clients.
So check him out online. That's Jeff Brown. This has been Talk Legal. I'm your host, Jeff Van Treese. Please tune in next Tuesday evening from 6 to 6:30, where we'll probably be talking about tomorrow's debate and the aftermath. Thank you so much. This is Jeff Van Treese. Have a great evening.
Thank you for listening to Talk Legal with Jeff Van Treese. Tune in next week for more insightful and exciting information about the law. You can contact Jeff by email at jvt2law@gmail.com or give him a call at 561-789-6866. That's 561-789-6866. The content of the preceding program, including all statements from the host and guests, is to provide